Hey, how about that freedom convoy in Canada? Freedom convoy. Son of a bitch. This is what fascistic Christianity does. They don't recognize borders. That so-called freedom convoy protest of Canadian truckers, you know what that's about? They're pissed off over a requirement that they have to be vaccinated to cross the U.S. border. And it's stirred up by the fascist Americans in media and these right-wing Christian groups. Their protest now has taken a very consequential turn. It really has. It's become nothing less than an attack on the economies of Canada and the United States. And Paul Waldman, writing at the Post, says that, well, you might have thought this was a mildly interesting story of the ordinarily polite world of Canadian politics becoming momentarily a little bit nuts. In truth, this is fundamentally a story about the United States. Yes, it is. And why is that? Well, mainly because the base of support and the people egging the Canadians on are Americans. It's the American right wing. We're seeing an attempt by Fox News, Fox Sewer, this disgusting shithole, and other fascist Christian media outlets and Republican politicians and these neo-fascist Christian, they're not neo, come on, Mike, these fascist Christian activists, all calling attention to the Canadian protests proudly. And they're trying, these fascistic bastards in this country are trying to build and expand and spread those protests as far as they possibly can. And according to Waldman, in the past couple of days, the protest has increased its focus on the border. And what they're doing is sabotaging the flow of trade between the United States and Canada. When I was a kid, my family used to go across the Ambassador Bridge from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario. And I used to be so thrilled because I'm in a foreign country, which looked exactly like the United States, except they had funny looking cars back then. I'm talking about a long time ago. But the Ambassador Bridge, and as many times as I went over the Ambassador Bridge, I didn't know that it was privately owned, privately built, and it was. But the protesters now have shut down the Ambassador Bridge. And about 25% of all trade between the United States and Canada, a fourth of it, goes over that bridge. Woo! And in the United States and in Canada, auto plants are closing because they can't get the parts that normally cross the border, either going north or going south. Now, Waldman points out something how to put this, ridiculously obvious. Imagine what the fascist Christians would be saying about the limits of legitimate protests if this kind of an economic attack was mounted by Black Lives Matter activists. Oh, fuck, right? You know, and I know, that the fascist Christians would be calling for the Black Lives Matter protesters to be crushed with as much violence as possible. Shoot them, kill them, stomp them, throw them off the fucking bridge. But because these are white fascist Christians, well, you know, this is legitimate peaceful protest. So now, the same politicians in this country who try to get bills passed in this country into law to provide immunity to people who run over protesters who might be protesting in a street or an interstate, when such protests are coming from the left, These same cockroaches are now championing the so-called freedom convoy, which is not about freedom, of course. I mean, again, it's the further corruption, destruction, prostitution of language. Very Orwellian, very fascist Christian. So I don't think you and I are aware of how much of a special cause this has become on the fascist right in this country. Waldman points out that conservatives, that's his word, not mine, use every megaphone at their disposal to promote and cheer on the protest. He notes this: Fox News has devoted hours of airtime to the protesters who, in the words of Sean Hannity, quote, are taking a stand for freedom, human dignity, and autonomy, end quote. Okay, you think this is just about people fed up with COVID restrictions? Well, if you think that, you're wrong. This is the trigger. This is what these fascist Christians have been using for the past 2 years. There's a Canadian journalist, Justin Ling, and he notes that the protest, quote, was the brainchild of James Bowder, an admitted conspiracy theorist who has endorsed the QAnon movement and called COVID-19, quote, the biggest political scam in history, end quote. So there you go. Fucking QAnon again. These cockroaches. What are we going to do about these people? Huh? Well, as so many people are predicting, I'm afraid that we are in for a bloody situation coming. And I think it's going to center around the elections coming up this November. Unless it happens before the election. I hate that. Anyway, as Paul points out, some of the participants just want to drive across the border without being vaccinated. You know, some of these drivers. But the protest is a collection of ordinary truckers, anti-vax crazies, and a bunch of far-right organizations who talk about implanted microchips in the vaccine and secret concentration camps. These crazy motherfuckers are still doing it. I remember when they were talking about this shit decades ago from the right. Oh, well, you know, Bill Clinton has got secret camps out west where young people are going to be incarcerated and brainwashed. They were goddamn, what was it called? The America Volunteer Force camps where kids were taught how the skills, how they could be volunteers. But the fascists back then, the Christian fascists back then said, no, that's about trying to indoctrinate these children into left-wing propaganda. I mean, these crazies have been out there forever. Included in this group now that have organized this bullshit in Canada, believe it or not, are Holocaust deniers, of course. Of course. Put some anti-Semitism in to spice it up. You know, the Jews. There are also Islamophobes. Hey, put some Islam poison into it to spice it up even more. And also people demanding, this will sound familiar, the arrest of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Just like this crazy fucking bitch over here, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, wants to have Joe Biden arrested. But she's the Q bitch. She is the ugly horse face of QAnon. Her and that horned son of a bitch is going to be in prison for a while. So as Walden points out, rather than a spontaneous upsurge of anger at a particular policy by the Canadian government, this is more about Canadian far-right activists who suddenly found the right vehicle to promote fringe anti-governmental views that had not gotten a foothold before. This is what fascists do. It's hard for them to sell fascism straight up. It's hard for the fascists to do that. So they disguise it. They may disguise it as predatory capitalism. They may disguise it around a protest against vaccines that are designed to save people's lives. They may disguise it around anti-Semitism or anti-black insanity. But these fuckers will disguise it one way or another because they know they're insane, but in their insanity, they also know that given a choice, the average person will pick real freedom against real slavery. Freedom that's available in a democratic system, however you want to define that, and slavery that is inherent in an autocratic system. That's why they disguise it. And where it concerns the Canadian trucker protest, it is pure fascism mixed together with all this other horse-shit. Holocaust deniers, Islamophobes, people demanding the arrest of Trudeau. Oh, and don't forget the implanted microchips and the concentration camps. Fucking madness. So, Baldwin asks, what about those activists now? Or what they have now, those activists that they didn't have before, is a full court press of promotion from the fascist American right, especially the fascist media outlets in this country. Now, I'm the one using the word fascist. Waldman's not. He calls it the American right and, conservatism, which it is not. Embracing these scum on the fascist right who are extreme in their views and their tactics, that's nothing new for the Fox Sewer or these other scummy conservative fascist outlets. It's a matter of course that they make heroes out of people like Cliven Bundy. Remember that fucker? A freeloading bum who insisted that he's not going to pay $1 an acre, whatever it was, to graze his fucking cattle. He was going to do it for free on public land. Yeah. So wherever there's an armed standoff involving a little clutch of these insane fuckers on the U.S. fascist right, you can bet your ass that the Fox Sewer is going to be there. And you can bet your ass that these online scum places or Onan News or the rest of these places are going to try to make these people into heroes. Well, hundreds of millions of us try to go about our business of just getting through the day. And this shit is pounded out, this fascistic bullshit, 24/7, 365 by places like the Fox Sewer. But Waldman points out these scum have a particular interest at moments like this one. He writes, conservative media are an incubator, a promoter, and participant in right-wing social movements that emerge in response to the election of a Democratic president. Right. So, Joe Biden. So whenever there's a Democrat in the White House, have you noticed this? Chaos, lawlessness becomes the order of the day in fascist media. Not out in the world. I mean, what Biden has done so far in America, sure, we're suffering from inflation right now, but that's not because of Biden, for fuck's sake. But what he has done to try to restore some kind of fiscal balance, political balance, he's left the door wide open to the Republican Party to assist in this. And he's got nothing but a middle finger. So it's not Biden. I used to scream and yell about the Democratic Party and the liberals in this country were not fighting back hard enough back in the 80s and 90s and aughts, the first decade of this century, to this liberal media bullshit. There's never fucking been liberal media in this country. It has been straightforward media, but it was labeled liberal by these fascistic bastards. And the phrase took, just like some of the bullshit from the anti-abortion movement. It becomes part of the vernacular. These right-wing demons They hype these angry protests. They promote outbreaks of violence. Look at the people who have been shot dead, and the scum fuckers who have committed the murders have walked free. They demand shutdowns of economic activity, whatever can contribute to the sense that real champions of freedom are rising up against the government. Real champions of freedom, these fascistic pricks. And the government, with the Democrat in the White House, is always portrayed as both brutal in its tyranny and too weak to maintain order. And that schizophrenic idea takes hold. And Americans listen to that shit. So many millions. Look at the 72 million who voted to reelect this fucking bum, Donald Trump. Oh, my God. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.